Okay, hi everyone. Good evening. Thank you guys for joining this webinar series organized by Women in Africa, a subgroup of the IDEA initiative under GRSS. And today we are very glad to have everyone because we have a very interesting, for two reasons, we have a very interesting topic we want to deal with today on building capacity for women in space leadership through STEM education. And we have a very interesting guest as well, who would be telling us a lot about her story and how she has been to transition from a young woman, like some of us, to a space leader in our current position as the African Space Agency Vice President. Okay, so next slide. Lucy, can we go to the next slide, please?
Just 1 minute. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I want over to Mary, who is going to introduce IDEA and Women in Africa and what we do as Women in Africa. Thank you. Over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you, everyone who has made out time to come for this webinar series. We are having this webinar series under the IDEA Committee, and our programs, they inspire, develop, empower, and advance all GRSS members and affiliates. The mission of the IDEA Committee is to celebrate, support, and thrive on our differences for the benefit of our membership and the GRSS community. Also, we plan and organize activities across regions, chapters, and conferences to develop, empower, and advance scientists from diverse backgrounds, technically, regionally, gender, etc. More so, we inspire members around the world to follow their technical interest to a career in geosciences and remote sensing. And lastly, we envision a vibrant GRSS community collectively using our diverse talents to innovate for the benefit of humanity. Women in Africa is an initiative under the IDEA Committee and promotes the mission of the IDEA Committee, which I highlighted before, especially in Africa. So we are organizing these webinars as one of the initiatives that we Women in Africa have for Africa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Maybe just to add to that a little bit, we also have this 5 other initiatives under IDEA: the Women Mentoring Women, the Geoscience Remote Sensing magazine, where we contribute to as IDEA members. And we also give out micro grants to support young scientists for field works, for their research ideas, as well as for conference activities. We also have another program called the Family Care Grant, which we use to support women who are attending specifically GRSS conferences all over the world. And IDEA members also support conference activities within around the globe. So if you're an IDEA member, you would definitely be able to go for conferences and maybe also get some discounts for conference participation. Yes, that's just briefly about IDEA. Also, we have the Down to Earth podcast. So you've not heard about it before, you should also check IDEA Down to Earth podcast on all listening platforms. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yes, go ahead. Now we want to introduce our speaker for today.
Miss Thandikile Chisala Mbvundula, a distinguished Malawian leader, is the Vice President of the African Space Agency and a renowned technology innovator, advisor, and management consultant. With over 30 years of strategic business leadership in Africa's information and communication technology sector, she has been at the forefront of driving digital transformation across the continent. Ms. Mbvundula holds a bachelor's degree in Control Systems and Computing Science from the University of Sheffield and a master's degree in Information Systems Management from the University of Liverpool. Her academic background, combined with deep technical expertise, has informed her impactful contributions to the ICT and digital policy landscape. Her leadership career spans senior roles in prominent institutions such as NICO Technologies, NEPAD E-Africa Commission, and the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa, OSISA, where she coordinated ICT sector initiatives across 10 Southern African countries. She also served as an ICT consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. In 1994, she founded Epsilon and Omega, Malawi's first commercial internet service provider and the first woman-owned ISP on the African continent, securing a legacy as one of Africa's internet pioneers. Ms. Mbvundula has held numerous advisory roles, significantly shaping digital accessibility, ICT development, and space policy at both national and continental levels. She has collaborated with key institutions, including the African Union, UNECA, and SADC, championing policy reforms and leading high-level negotiations. Our efforts have been instrumental in launching transformative initiatives such as the East African Submarine Cable System, EASY, which expanded regional connectivity and strengthened Africa's digital infrastructure. Please welcome Ms. Thandikile Chisala Mbvundula.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you very much for the invitation to come and participate in your webinar. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, I think, and all delegates. It really is an honor to be here with you today. I hope you can hear me. Yep, okay. And I'm really appreciative of those of you that have made time to just come and listen for a minute to what other people's experiences are. There's always a lot we can learn from others' experiences in life. As they've already indicated what I've done, my background was in ICT and control engineering. I went to university at Sheffield at a time when I was actually the only African woman in the whole faculty of engineering. It was at a time when we were told that, you know, women's liberation, women can do anything, burn your bras and do whatever you want to do. And I chose to do engineering, and expecting to find a whole load of women in the faculty. We found 2 English girls, me, the only Malawian, the only African, in fact, 1 Chinese girls, and a few Malaysian ladies. So it's a long time back, and I think a lot has changed since then. But going through the experience that I've gone through over the years, I've tended to find myself in slightly odd spaces, being the only woman, the only African, the only, you know, in throughout my career, actually, both my education and my career. But I've been privileged in many ways, and I had supportive parents who, when I decided to do engineering in the early 1980s, said, if that's what you want to do, go for it. And so I did. And it was the beginning of this path of mine that has led to where I am today. Coming back to Malawi, I didn't find any opportunities to practice my control systems engineering. So I focus on the ICT portion of my degree. Coming back at the time, again, I was the only woman in most spaces because a lot of my peers and the people that I worked with and engaged with were all men. I was the only woman in my organization, to the extent that when I eventually got married and got pregnant, and I went to my boss and I said, what is the maternity policy? They said, we don't have one. We didn't have any women. So go and find out what everybody else does and come and tell us what to do, which gave me the opportunity to set my own maternity profile. It's in terms of policies within the organization. But I had supportive bosses, and it enabled me as I progressed to stand up in many rooms and present what I knew about the ICT sector. And one of the things that I think as professional women in technical spaces that enabled me to get through a lot of the challenges was the fact that I just made sure that I knew my stuff better than anybody else in the room. And that enabled me to stand confidently and we totally confident. And even if they were like, what is this woman doing in this space? If I spoke and they listened to me, they knew I knew what I was talking about. So that enabled me to progress. You face a lot of you do face misogyny. You face racism as well, because even amongst the some of the peers at the time, a lot of the executives were not African, they were not Black. And some of them would be very cynical of and one was particularly rude about a little Black girl coming into his office. He's like, what is this little Black girl doing in my office? And I was there to teach him how to use his new financial system, which I was the expert for. And he indicated that no, he was not interested in listening. So he was extremely rude to me. So I said, look, I'm sorry, I don't need to train you. And I left. And my boss supported me. I told him that this is the situation. He says, no, you don't have to, you're under no obligation to be to continue under those circumstances. At the time, he called the office and said he wanted somebody else to come and train him. And when he did, my boss was like, she's the expert. She's the only one that knows the systems. So he took about 3 days to ponder what he was going to do, having invested in a very expensive system. Called me, apologized. I accepted the apology. I went back to his office. I set up a system, and we had a very respectful relationship thereon. But it wasn't necessary for me to, to rub it in that, you've had to apologize. It was like we acted as if nothing had happened. Tandy, would you like a cup of coffee? Oh, I'd love a cup of coffee. I'd have my coffee, and we'd get on with the work, sort it out, and I leave. So we had a very respectful relationship thereon. But it also helped that I got support from my my employers. That was, I did not need to accept that kind of those kind of conditions. Over the years, I eventually, I set up systems, computerized financial systems in over 120 organizations in the country. And that gave me an opportunity to network across multiple industries and multiple sectors. And one of the things that I did realize was that technology was not it wasn't an end in itself, but really it was a tool to facilitate and enhance the better delivery of services. So it inspired me to sort of look beyond just the technology. And yes, I was a techie, but I was a techie who took time to learn how to apply the solutions. And the same applies to even the space sector, in all the sectors we work in as technical experts. A lot of what we work with is for solutions for problems and challenges we face as countries, as individuals in our respective countries. So that is something that inspired me. And then I realized when I eventually moved into establish the first internet and email service in 1993, 94 in Malawi, that I was setting up, at the time I didn't think about it, but I was setting up an internet email service in a country that had one national telco. There were no cell phones at the time. We had one radio station and one newspaper and no television. So in terms of the digital desert that we were in, it was quite vast. But that challenge being as it was, I realized that people did not have an opportunity to get exposure to even what email was or what internet was. So I ended up having to do a lot of sensitization, awareness raising, and training for people to understand and appreciate. And I literally went across the country giving presentations and demonstrations to people. And one of my clients called me an email evangelist, because that's essentially what I was doing. I was teaching them this is what it's about. And again, that's a point in Africa that I think is important, that as technical experts, we sometimes keep to our spaces and we are not, we don't take time to be cognizant of the fact that the people we are wanting to sell our services, sell our products, sell our solutions to are not technical people. They need to be able to understand it from their perspective. So the onus is on us to adjust where we sit, to look at it from their perspective, say, if I didn't know what I know about science and technology, how would I explain it to my grandmother in the village what a computer is? And until we think of it from their perspective, it becomes a little bit of a challenge for us to get our message across. So while my career began in ICT, designing systems, implementing solutions, consulting, I realized that that the technology itself couldn't be sold on its own. That's one problem. Second problem was that we actually, for email and internet, did not have the policy infrastructure and framework in the country that would enable email and internet to actually operate. So I then got involved in understanding what we needed to put in place, what policies we need to put in place, which sectors we needed to develop. And I then got involved in amending the Telecommunications Act in Malawi in 1998 to enable internet to be utilized in the country. When I first went to the regulator, who was at the time the national operator, and I said, look, I'd like to register my emails internet service. They said, we don't know what it is. So go away, and when we figured it out, you can come back. So I was, being so early in the system, had an advantage in that I had what I call a regulatory sandbox, because I was able to experiment and explore what options and how we could set it up without the onus of having heavy regulation, because they didn't know what it was. And it was only later when they did understand it that they now put in regulation. But by that time, we had more players, we had opened it up, and we were sort of setting up the system so that it really could be a viable system and solution. And as I traveled around the world, because part of what happened is that in the early days, there were not many of us in the internet, in this space. And as a result, we would, you'd get invited to conferences, continental and global conferences, and get to see what the rest of the world was doing and say, I like that solution for my home country. But then you find you don't have the policies in place. You don't have the legislation in place. And then this is now what got me into the legislation and policy environment. And I had to be at the table. One of the challenges we had in Malawi was that we had duty tariffs on computers, import tariffs on computers of 65%. So if you bought a computer for $1,000, $650 would be added on as a levy, as tax for the government before the company put their profit on, which made computers totally unaffordable and out of reach to the majority of the population. I realized at the time that if we went down this path, we were never going to be able to get people to be able to access computers. And so I lobbied the government, because there were two countries on the continent that were moving ahead very, very rapidly. And that was Ghana and Mauritius. And they were the only two countries that had zero duty on computers. So I lobbied our government to say, look, we need to do this. We need to take the duty off computers. And it took 4 years to do it. And in the third year, they said, this is Mbvundula. You'll be pleased to know we've taken 10% off that. I said, thank you very much, Honorable Minister, but we need to take it to zero. And I got the vice president. I managed to talk to the vice president in 1999, and he made a commitment in 2000 to take it off. So he took the duty to zero in 2000 successfully. And the ripple-on effect, I never realized the ripple-on effect beyond our borders, because my counterparts in Tanzania, when they realized we had done that, went to their government and said, Malawi has taken their computer duty to zero. We should do the same. So they did. And then I was only told a few years ago that the Kenyans then said, Tanzania has taken it. and they took their duty. So the ripple-on effect across the continent was far bigger than what I thought and I expected. And when you asked, people asked, because I wasn't being paid for this, and people would ask, well, why were you doing it? I said, because I understood what had to happen. And if I didn't do it, the country would still be way back in the dark ages without that knowledge. So I put myself out there to say, and I was, somebody, a cousin of mine said to me the other day, she says, you're an idealist. You believe that things are going to happen and you believe in the good of a society. And I said, I do. And I strongly believe that it's important that if you see something that needs to be done, don't say somebody should do it. Because who's a somebody? You actually can recognize a problem. And I actually had a sign in my office that actually said, I wish those who say it can't be done would get out of my way while I'm doing it, which gave me the earnest to really get out there, climb out of windows, put up cables and so on. And it's led to an interesting life. But that being the case, because I got involved in policy, I got to understand and contribute to the continental ICT policy frameworks and setting up the governance structures for the ICT sector across the continent. So as it was mentioned, I was involved with, in NEPAD, we negotiated for the first Eastern Coast submarine cables, the easy submarine cables, and that involved negotiating across 32 countries, the policymakers, the regulators, and the telcos, for them to agree that they were going to change their regulation and legislation to allow this submarine cable to go through, and they would all utilize it. Now, I come to this experience that this built up my capacity and my ability to engage with different sectors, and really contributed in a big way to being able to be in the position I am today. I actually was retired. So I was retired and, watching cabbages grow through COVID and minding my own business when the government of Malawi appointed me to chair the Malawi Space Agency Task Force in 2023. So the Space Agency Task Force was to establish a Malawi Space Agency in Malawi. Now, Malawi is a small country in the southern region of Africa. We have a population of about 20 million, a number of challenges, but we felt it was important, the government felt it was important that we establish a space agency. And while we said, okay, I took on the task to chair the task force, we had a multidisciplinary task force, including space scientists, Malawian space scientists in the diaspora, because in Malawi, we didn't actually have space scientists. We have experts in remote sensing and GIS and so on, a lot of who, unfortunately, are educated and not employed. They don't have employment opportunities. But we do have space scientists working in the diaspora, working with NASA, working with the South African National Space Agency, and so on. So these were on our team. So remotely, as a virtual team, I've basically spearheaded this virtual team to establish the framework for the establishment of the Malawi Space Agency Task Force. As a result of this, when the African Union was setting up the African Space Agency, it's a process that's been ongoing for now 9 years. They set up the African Space Policy and African Space Strategy. And they now, in terms of the governance structure of the space agency, it is overseen by a council, the African Space Council. And on the council, 10 members of experts in various fields are elected by the heads of state and government of the African Union to oversee the space agency itself. The role of the space agency is to facilitate and collaborate across space agencies and the space sector across all 54 member states of the African continent. And that's a big responsibility. We were officially launched in April this year. And along with that launch comes the sort of the point that we are only the second continental space agency in the world. The first continental space agency is the European Space Agency, and that is our sister agency. We've done a lot of work with them. And we are only the second. All the other space agencies are national space agencies. So NASA, for example, is responsible for the United States, Chinese Space Agency for China, Russian Space Agency for Russia. So they're individual country space agencies. But in terms of continental responsibility, the African Space Agency is only the second body of this nature in the world. Launched in April, and for us to be launched, the heads of states and government had to elect 10 council members to coordinate as a governance structure. And I was privileged to be one of the 10 elected by the heads of state and government. Dr. Tidiane Ouattara from Cote d'Ivoire was elected as the president. So they elected 10 council members and then elected the president and the vice president. So there were 2 elections. So as the president always says, he and I were double elected. We had to go through 2 elections for us to assume our positions. And that is basically how I ended up as the vice president of the African Space Council. And yeah, it's a big responsibility. And thank you. It's a big responsibility. It's exciting. And I think there are a lot of questions that somebody with so much ICT experience, what are you doing in the space sector? You know, what are you doing, you know, leading the space sector? And it's science. It's science, it's technical. It's an area I've always spent, you know, a lot of my time learning about new sectors. And when I was given the responsibility of setting up the Malay Space Agency, there was a lot that I had to learn about the sector. However, I think that when we look at the governance of the space agency, my experience in setting up the Malay Space Agency Task Force and my experience in ICT as a technical sector and setting up the governance policy frameworks for it over the last, I know I said 30 years, but it's actually over 40. So I just was trying to reduce my age a little bit. Vanity. It's over 40 years that I've been in the sector for. But that broad experience that I bring to the table enables me to contribute to, you know, sort of significantly to the setup of the African Space Agency, because our responsibility now is to set up the whole agency. It's a big task. It's something that I'm very excited about. And the opportunities for the continent as a whole, because we are responsible for countries which have got space agencies, countries that are starting to set up space agencies, countries that are thinking about space agencies, and countries that haven't thought about it at all. So it's the diversity is there, and we have a major responsibility of raising awareness about how space can be effectively utilized to assist in delivering on the development goals of the continent. And that's something that I've done. Governance structures, it's also something that I've done. So I bring that wealth of experience to the table with me. And I'm very excited to grow it as far as it can go. You know, there are always challenges in these kind of industries. And I was giving a speech. I think I confuse people sometimes because I like wearing my traditional African wear, and people think that they'll see this woman in traditional African, they're like, what can she know? But that's why I like to turn the tables a little bit and say, you know, it's not about how you look on the outside. There's so much more to everybody you meet. And so we just respect everybody in whichever capacity. We're constantly surprised about what people who you didn't know anything about will know. And it's just been one of those things. But this competency, you know, for me, encouraging young women in STEM is also encouraging women in professionalism in whatever they do has also been a very big thing with me. I set up what we call the Malay Professional Women's Association, Empower, in 1994 as well. And that was to create a space for women to support one another, to promote professionalism amongst women. And I realized that I was in male-dominated spaces as where all the leaders were, but there were not many women around me. And what I was trying to do in setting up Empower, an organization that was to set up what I called an old girls network. You know, I was a member of Rotary. I was the first African woman in Malawi to be elected to to be inducted in the Rotary Club of Malawi. And I was like, I'm in these spaces. I get information, opportunities that are way beyond anything that I could utilize. And all these women have no access to them. So that's what I wanted to do, set up an old girls network where we can share that information. Because as women, sometimes we get information, you hear about something that, so-and-so could utilize it. But a lot of the time we don't have a channel to actually share that information. So I think it is, the mentorship and sharing of information amongst women and just reaching out is really, really critical and important. Despite the many years of progress we've made, I think there's still a lot of work to be done for women to continue to realize that they need to continue to empower others as they move forward, continue to empower. It's part of what we should do. It's mothering in a way, and so this, has been an interesting opportunity for me to ensure that let's try and open the gates, broaden the perspective. And one of the things that I appreciate about the African Union is that in ensuring the composition of the council, the composition of the council is 2 members from each of the 5 regions of the continent. And from each of the 5 regions of the continent, the Eastern, Northern, Western, Southern, Central Africa, a man and a woman, that they are women. And once you had in the election, once they had elected a man from one region, the woman had to come from another region. So it was now the second election was for who is going to be the female amongst the women that are elected to the council. So that is how our elections went, and that ensures that equity. And bear in mind, I know that sometimes people think that, oh, you're forcing the space for women, but yes, it's ensuring women are at the table, but the women that are at the table, trust me, we're all qualified. We're all very qualified and experienced. So we bring that to the table, but sometimes if spaces were not made for us, we wouldn't have the doors open in that way. So, I look back to my career and say that, it's the STEM education was a key to opening the door for me. But then that's what grounded me. But, we mustn't just think that the education is enough. There's a lot more beyond our education. There's the networking. There's being ready to volunteer in spaces that you normally would be too shy to volunteer. Reading up and making sure that by the time you come to the table, you know more than anybody at the table, so they can't challenge you. Because I was 21 when I started, and I was setting up systems in major corporations. But if I made sure when I went to any space I went to, I knew more than anybody knew at the table. And that gave me the confidence because I knew what I was talking about. But it also reassured them when they realized that I did know what I was talking about. They would sometimes forget that I'm a woman. I forgot I was one most of the time because I wasn't looking at myself. So it was always interesting. You don't realize that sometimes people are acting a little funny because you're a woman, because you're not looking at yourself and you don't realize that you're a woman. That's why they're looking at you funny. But, you think about, oh, that was why. But you don't always realize it. But the thing is, they will be looking at you as a woman first. But if you demonstrate you know what you're talking about, they will soon forget and they'll focus on the content. So that was what I generally found. So yeah, so being ready to stand up, being ready to contribute at fora. I noticed that your organization, and that's excellent that they support women participating in conferences. And I think it's important that when women go to conferences, that you listen carefully, you read up about it before you get there, and you be ready to make intelligent contributions and intervention. So yeah, my advice for young women engineers would be bold, commit to lifelong learning. I'm still learning, I know, and build networks with mentors and use your voice. Look at balancing your vision, and you need to be a little bit resilient in this space. And I think I had a little presentation which I was going to present. I don't know whether I have time. I think I'm out of time now. But my presentation was basically talking about the ladder of empowerment for women in space leadership. And I don't know whether I have a couple of minutes that I could just present just a few slides just for information. If that's okay with the organizers?
Please go ahead.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
yes,
you very much.
definitely.
Thank you. Okay, so then let me just put this presentation. It's very brief. Let's see that. Okay, so basically the ladder of empowerment for women in space leadership. Looking at the ladder of, I don't know whether you can see this, empowerment for women in space leadership. Really, we're talking about our STEM education at the bottom, skills development and confidence. And as I've already mentioned, confidence comes with you knowing your work, knowing your space. Mentorship and networks, exposure and opportunities. And this is what international conferences and global conferences give you. Looking at the institutional policy and support. Sometimes we're fortunate enough to be in organizations where we do get that. In other cases, we're going to have to find that support elsewhere. But networking would really help us in identifying spaces where we can get that additional support. And ultimately, women in space leadership. Base foundation in terms of STEM education, access, encouragement, support, outreach for girls in science, scholarships and fellowship of women in STEM, which I think I was privileged to have a scholarship to do my degree. Strong technical grounding in engineering, ICT, data science. Skills development, I cannot overemphasize. Know your stuff. I've already mentioned it. Be proactive in your participation. Be hands-on in projects and research. If you can, have opportunities for leadership and communication training, and build resilience and build in yourself. Believe in yourself. I think for the first time in my life, when I was elected to this position as vice president, and then I realized everybody else was, doctor this and doctor that, PhD, and I was like, what am I doing in this space? And my daughter said to me, Ma, are you telling me that you have imposter syndrome? And I said, I think it's possible that for the first time in my life, I may do. And she says, you're supposed to be in that space. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been elected there. And I was like, okay. And then when I met my counterparts, I realized that, yeah, I earned my space at the table. So believe in yourself, And when we're looking at mentorship and networks, role models and mentorship circles where you can, if they don't exist, build them. Sponsorship by senior leaders, if you're fortunate enough to get that. Then senior leader doesn't need to be within your organization. They can be in other organizations. Peer learning and support networks. Okay. Participation in policy and governance forums, because in this space, you do need to be at the table where the policy is being set. If you're not at the table and contributing to how your roles need to be fit into society, you will be left at on the sideline. Internships and global exchanges, and platforms to showcase women's research and innovation. Institutional and policy support, I think I've already mentioned, gender-responsive policies in space agencies, dedicated funding, recognition, and visibility for women leaders. And when we look at the top, women as CEOs, policymakers, entrepreneurs, mission leaders. And when we talk about women in space, in the space sector, I know everybody thinks when we mention space that, oh, we're talking about everybody going to space. No, the space value chain is extremely long. It's extremely long. There's a lot of sectors you can get into. You can get into design, you can get into systems development for managing systems processes. You can get into fabrication, manufacturing. So the different engineering disciplines will actually be very useful, whichever one it is. So you can have opportunities across the space value chain. And women shaping Africa's space agenda and mentoring the next generation. And I'm hoping that in the time that I'll be at the space agency, I'll have an opportunity to continue to engage with young professionals, women across the continent, and inspire them to say, I can do it. If she can do it, I can do it too. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you so much. I mean, I learned a whole lot. I'm trying to look for the icon where I can clap or something, but I can't find any. So I'm just gonna clap from here. Thank you so much. I learned a whole lot. I'm sure everyone here also learned. From what I see, it's not just even space geosciences that are in this room. So I know that all what you have shared with us is also quite applicable to any field we find ourselves as women. And you said that we need to know yourself better. We know your domain, or have the knowledge better than anyone in the room. And I think that stood out for me. You really need to gain confidence from all what you actually know. And I think that really stood out for me. You also said that we should not focus on the technical side, because I know that a lot of techies they find policy boring and they just want to like produce stuff, and then they don't really care much about customer feedback or the uptake or the impact. And I think the way you highlighted that is also very interesting. I really enjoyed that. I also learned that we should also share information with everyone, and mentorship is also quite important. And we should also broaden our perspective in space. So thank you so much for this. We have quite a number of questions. I also have my questions, but I'm going to focus on questions in the chat. And so very quickly, the first question that is here, some of the questions you've also touched on, but I'm just going to like highlight them. The first one is, how do you deal with the masculine pipeline? And do you think you worked harder because you were a woman? That's the first question. Okay, shall I just respond to them as we go? Okay, maybe I would read out the ones in the chat now, because we have a few also. In the chat. Okay, yes, we have that, and we also have some in the question and answer box. So maybe I just read it out and then you can answer them. So that's the first question. The second question is, how do you think we can best communicate science to the community? The third question I see here is, how did you identify and evolve career paths over the years? And with all the rapid changes and new technologies over the years, what helped you stay adaptable and kept that hunger as you grew? So that's like the 4 questions in here, and then we'll go to the questions in the Q&A box. Over to you. Okay, thank you very much. How do I deal with the masculine pipeline? Yeah, I think it was, it varied, because I was in a space when men were really not used to women being in their space at all. I was the only woman in the company that I worked in. Even the receptionists were men. So that was kind of the space that I was in. I was fortunate in that once I learned my stuff and I was given an area that I was a particular expert in, I was a lead in that area, so it really didn't matter, because the others that could come in, I led in that area. But what I have done, and this applies to the sort of evolving my career path and keeping relevant, I read a lot about a lot of things. And people are always asking, why are you always
reading this? Why are you watching politics? Why are you watching the news? Why are you? Because all of it is going to come and affect me one way or another. And it means that, you know, the curious thing about it is it means that, and it's just a habit. It's a habit of mine. I read about a lot of different things because whatever they are, whichever section of science it is, and it means when there's a conversation about practically anything at the table, there's something that I can contribute because I've read a little bit about it, or I've read and I've understood and I can grasp what is going on. I must confess that I started panicking at one stage when ICT started evolving so quickly. I was like, oh my God, there's too much to learn. And then I had to say, calm down, focus, choose a lane, go with it, you know? And so that you're not trying to do too many things at once. And I was always sort of keeping ahead. You know, you hear about something new, I keep ahead, I keep reading. So that's how I actually kept abreast of what was going on in the sector. And yes, the masculine pipeline was there. I don't know whether I worked harder because I was a woman. I'm just a hard worker. So whether I'm a woman or not, I'm just a hard worker. You know, I like to. I'm pedantic about things. I like things to be just so, and I need to know why did that not work that way. You know, and when I was troubleshooting and in programming and things, I mean, I started fixing computer viruses before you had antivirus software, because I was patient enough to go into the back end of the system and literally take out the pieces one by one, like you're picking out thorns from a child's fist. And that's because I had the patience to do it. Because I was like, this is not going to get the best of me. There's got to be a way to do this. So it's just being pedantic. So working hard, I work hard anyway. But yes, you do have to try and find a work-life balance. I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 2. And I made sure that even when I was working, I would have to make sure that I'd come home and make sure that my children's homework was done and supervised. I would have dinner at a particular time, supervise homework, bed, you know. Once they've gone to bed, I can go back to my work. So I had a routine that enabled me to do that. How best to communicate science to the community? I try to understand it from the person's perspective. What is their problem? The thing about it is that when I understand what their problem is, I have all the scientific knowledge that can solve it. But the thing is, I have to then translate that into solution. So I have to take the perspective, take off my knowledgeable tech hat, put it aside, and take it from an ordinary person and say, what are they seeing? And when I understand that, then I can then start communicating in a manner in which it speaks to them. And somewhere in my CV, I developed what I called COAT, customer-oriented application training, because I trained a lot of people. And what I realized when you were training people to use Excel spreadsheets, there was always standard training: sales, cost, profit. That was the standard training for any spreadsheet. And I realized that people come in and they don't do sales. And when engineers came in, they didn't know anything about sales. So if I'm teaching them sales, cost, and profit, they're going to be trying to figure out what's the sales and cost about. So I said, what do you do? And they would show me their work, and it was up to me to understand their work and translate it to Excel. And then I took their own work. They know their work. But when I showed them how to use this tool for it, it was easy. So it's being able to take yourself out of that technical space, because sometimes it's nice to shine that, you know, I know all the technology and all the techie terms, but it bamboozles them, yes, but you lose them. So you need to sort of take all that and go back to what I call basics. Yeah, so I think I've covered the bit about the evolving my career path. Constantly learning. And I'm still learning. I you know, sort of, as I said, I'm a granny, but still learning. So yeah, I don't know whether I answered all the questions there.
Yes, I think you answered a few. There is a question on what kind of initiatives. Okay, before we do this, let's do the one before that. The question, what advice would you give to the next generation of African scientists who dream of working in space exploration? I think you've also touched on that. Just one advice, then we'll go to the next question.
I think learn about the sector. Learn about the sector and find out that there's more, because everybody thinks of space exploration as I'm going to go to the moon. There is so much more. There's so much more than that. And I think the breadth of the sector is something you need to continue to read up about. And as an African Space Agency, we will be putting information about opportunities and sessions on our site as we get sort of more established. And I think keep up with that. We're recruiting the staff right now, but we are going to have a lot going on for the continent. And I think keep up with that, keep informed. Yeah. And if there's anything in your country, keep informed. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Many countries from the global south face prejudice or are not treated as equal partners in international space and science collaborations, even though these partnerships are essential to developing sustainable solutions for the planet. From your perspective, how can we work towards making these relationships more equitable and respectful?
That's actually one of the major responsibilities we have as the African Space Agency, to ensure that our collaboration and with other players in the state, because right now Africa has got 1.4 billion people, and it's the biggest new market for the space sector in the world. Okay, so everybody's keen to work in, but we are keen that this is not going to be, we are not going to just be the consumers for the world. We are going to be the innovators, creators as well. And what we're doing in terms of our engagement with our partners is to ensure that we're co-creating, collaborating, and ensuring that it's fair for Africa. That's one of our major roles. So for us as the space agency and the Space Council, that is a critical area as we engage with partners in our negotiations that, yeah, we will facilitate access across, but we want that to be in a fair and equitable basis. We want capacity building. We want opportunities for our space scientists and engineers across the continent.
Okay, that's really good. I'm going to take just two more questions and then we will wrap it up. The first one is, what kind of initiatives are required to minimize space debris? It's a technical question. And outer space security challenges. Any ways to create awareness among youth via STEM? And then, I mean, there's been questions on how can we encourage women? I think you've touched on that. Any sort of campus ambassador program, I don't know if you have a program you want to talk about, that's also fine. I think that's that. Then there's also a question on how can someone or can people join your old girls network? Interesting question. But yeah.
Oh yes, so I noticed there was a question about whether or not the structure of what I had done could be replicated. I really wish it could. Actually, I do recall mentioning it to a colleague from Namibia, and she went on to replicate it in Namibia. Yeah, so definitely it's a kind of thing, setting up old girls networks. And at the time we set it up, we didn't have the kind of level of connectivity we have today, because we didn't have mobile phones, and so there was a whole lot we didn't have. And today it's so much easier to set up those networks. So yes, definitely, and I'd be available to sort of advise if anybody was interested. But you were talking about, there was a question about space debris. I think these are all issues that we would be dealing with at policy levels and looking at the space policies, both at the continental level and what the national space agencies are developing. But we will be contributing to that discussion. It's a global challenge. It's a global engagement that's going on. But Africa will be making sure that we make our position heard, because a lot of with the land mass that Africa is, a lot of the debris is landing on Africa at the moment. So I think we will be at the table in terms of the policies around that. So yeah, that's something that we'll have to do. And you said the campus ambassador program. I'm not
For
sure
African
about this
Space
one.
Agency, I don't know, to maximize outreach among college students.
Okay. What I would say is that I think I would encourage what we call communities of practice to be established. And that's something that I think is a powerful way to have communities of practice. So you have groupings of people in particular, because, for example, remote sensing, you'd have groups that deal with remote sensing and GIS, the different element, drone, using drones and things. There are different interests, areas of interest around the space sector. And I would encourage communities of practice to be set up. And those then generate the information, the knowledge, and so on and so forth, and share that, and also provide the platforms for further engagement in terms of in each of those different sectors. That's what I'm not sure about the campus ambassador program, because at the moment we are literally just starting as the agency. There's been only the president at the agency until 8 weeks ago when I joined, and then we're gradually getting all the rest of the staff, initial staff. So it's and we will be doing recruitment over the next 3 years. So starting from next year, we're going to be recruiting for positions. And so we as a council are not the technical, we are the governance, policy, diplomacy arm, and we oversee the main agency. Now the agency is a technical, and there will be opportunities and job opportunities and openings there as well over the next 3 years.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Good to know that. We're looking forward to that as Africans, even Africans not in Africa.
Yes.
We are really looking forward to such opportunities. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I mean, I had questions,
you.
but I'm going to shelve them
Yeah.
because we're
No, but thank you very
out
much.
of time.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for also accepting our invite and agreeing to come and speak to us. I'm sure all of us in here are we learned a lot, not just one
I hope so.
thing we have, and even those who are not space geoscientists would have also learned quite a number of things from you today.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Yes. So maybe the next slide. So for those of us who are geoscientists, we want to ask you to tell you why you should be part of IEEE GRSS community. And the first is with GRSS community gives you an opportunity to gain visibility and access to international programs, research opportunities globally, so you can also connect to industry experts, research, distinguished researchers that can help you promote your research ideas as an employer and even as a researcher. You can also benefit from very broad spectrum of interests of GRSS members. So through networking opportunities, through conferences, you can actually speak with other GRSS members. I try to gain ideas on whatever, be it research or whatnot. You can also work with like-minded researchers and developers to make a difference in the world through remote sensing. You can develop relationships with world leaders in remote sensing. And you can benefit from a lot of a stimulating mix of theory and practice in remote sensing. Finally, GRSS, if you have a GRSS membership, you have access to discounts, you have access to research grants, and so many other opportunities that would foster your research, whether you're a student or you're a professional. So yes, you can join. I think there's the information. Okay, there's definitely information in the chat box on how you can become a member. And so if we have, what we usually do in our webinars is if we have 2 people who are geoscientists and are not members yet, and you can just type in your email. So the fastest thing is the first 2 people to type in their email and to show their interest in being members of IEEE GRSS will be given free membership for a year. So if you're here and you're a geoscientist and you would love to be a GRSS member, so just type in your email in the chat box. And the first 2 emails, yes, we have one, Camila.Gomez. So we're going to wait for another 2 minutes. So if you would love to be a GRSS member, you have the opportunity to write your email right now, and then you get free membership for a year. Going, gone. Okay, so over to you, Muzmi, to give a final wrap up of the session.
Thanks so much, Ari, and the speaker, Professor Mbvundula. It was very, I must say, it was a mesmerizing story, and I really and truly enjoyed it. So I hope the participants have already enjoyed and learned so much from her, starting from her personal life involving being in the policies for during her pregnancy, then the elections, being a presidency takeover, and all the life challenges, how she has taken over being the first African woman in the space scientist. So thank you so much. I would like to extend thanks to Ari, who is taking a wonderful lead for Women in Africa webinar series, the Women in Africa webinar lead, Mary Immaculate, who always being so instrumental and so supportive to all the members. And last but not the least, to our idea lead, Paula and Nikki, who always played an important role and always supported us in all the means we expected. So thank you everyone, to all the participants, for your valuable time, and hope to see you soon again in the next webinar. Thank you so much.